They had not believed me, locked me up inside this cage. I had escaped death more than on one occasion, as any man can expect to do. But how does a man keep on escaping death, especially when locked inside a metal cage, of which the keys hang on a guard's belt, and is paroled by ferocious dogs and guards alike? My cell was white to look at, although it placed me inside an asylum, fearing me a threat to society. So much so they put pillows up on the walls to keep me at complete comfort. They took me through a long dark corridor to a room where they put electrodes to my head and measured my brain activity, sending shocks that left burnt marks, injecting me with concoctions of drugs which I had no control over, in a vain hope in their regard to get me to speak about what I had seen. But whenever I did explain, they'd write it down and just start over again with some other method of medical torture. It seemed hours that I was left in that room, able to hear the screams of similar patients, being tortured to make them sane again. I could hear the guards hitting the patients banging their heads repeatedly on the walls. I could only imagine the suffering they were going through, and maybe too they had a story like mine to tell, that no man could remain sane after hearing. Then my friendly doctor came and told me that they had found no body, and he quizzed me to its whereabouts. But as ever much I screamed at him, he would not listen, would not understand. I tried to warn him of the impending danger mankind was in, that every mortal was in, every man, animal, as these creatures were leaderless, and would ravage all until there was no more blood to spill. He looked at my file and made no mention. But his coming was as swift as his exit. I knew I would never see him again. Later they took me back to my cell, where I sat cross-legged, whistling to myself, for I could no longer sleep. I knew if I did, I would not know whether I was indeed in dreamlands or awake. The dream terrors were too much for me, and anyway, I doubt I could sleep, fearing these impish creatures' comings. I held onto the bars and cried out for someone to help me, to let me out before the creatures came, to spare me a chance, to spare all mankind a chance, to warn governments, leaders, everyone, as town after town would fall until only the dead land would remain. I was allowed one bath in the afternoon. I laid inside the cold water. I had not used any hot water, as every time I saw it, I was reminded of the cauldron of boiling water in which I was nearly boiled alive. I closed my eyes for a few seconds and then opened them again. Everything seemed quite peaceful and serene. It had been the first time such a moment had occurred. I wish it could have gone on forever. I leaned forward and opened the warm tap a little, and then shut it off and leaned back. Then from above a huge foot-length black spiky spider fell into my lap, its huge fangs and eyes protruding out toward me. What was I to do? I had no escape. This huge spider was right in front of me, with its left poison fangs sinking down into my flesh. I jumped back, and then it was gone. What had happened I cannot be too sure. Was it real or just an imagination? I could not tell. I quickly got out of the bath and dried myself, and was escorted back to my padded cell. Night fell swiftly. My eyes were red raw, unable to rest, and I felt a kind of dizziness, as I had not eaten for such a long time. It was at this time I heard the first sign of mankind's untimely doom. It was some creature. It sounded much like a cat of kind that cried out so loud that it broke the very silence that had ensued in the cells that night. It cried so loudly and so painfully that it woke many of the inmates up, and then became rowdy and restless. "This is it," I remarked, not sure if they could hear me or not. It was at this point I was visited by my dead wife Vera. At first I wouldn't talk with her, ignoring her, but I was so alone in that metal cage, I had to speak, so I did. "So you are dead. But all these times you comforted me. looked after me. I don't even remember now when you were alive and dead, which memories to believe or not. Worry not, my dear, so it shall be over, and in this eternal damnation you can join me. We are the children of the leaders of the soul catcher, he that you slain and lives on in our seed. Never, I exclaimed. Oh, you will, you must, you were his last, you have no choice, you have already become. He is you, and you is he. From this point on, I stopped listening and even tried to attack her, but my hands just slipped through her non-corporeal body. I'd been so engrossed in my wife's banter that I had not noticed the noise that the rest of the inmates had started to make. They were shouting and banging their cups against the sides of the bars. I tried to peer around the bars of my cage to see down the corridor, and it was then I realized why the noise was so agitated. It was one of those impish creatures that had slid through the mud from the underground, accompanied by other beasts of the black-hooded man, skeletons, mixtures of men and beasts, dismembered spirits, headless apparitions, and such vulgar creatures. Sound by sound the noise grew and then dissipated as the men were killed and ravaged. I knew my time was nigh. I sat on my knees awaiting my captors. I didn't have to wait long as the creature entered the cell next to mine, and hurtled through the wall came the man with a spider-like creature attached to his chest, with two long sucking tubes inserted through his nose up to the passage of his brain. The tubes were transparent and opaque until I saw a greeny, brownish liquid descend. I didn't have much time. I jumped over the creature and sprinted down the corridor, running for my very life, pushing my way past the creature and any inmate still alive. I had reached the outside world once again, and it was there that I could not have been prepared for the shock I had to perceive. All around me was carnage. The sky above roared with a huge thunderclap, and the clouds seemed to descend from a high distance to right above me, blackening over everything. There was a rumble on the ground like a multitude of earthquakes, and fires burned through buildings to the left and right of me. It was as if I had woken up on the day of judgment. All was burning, and the thick black dense smoke filtered through the very air with the small dust particles of human remains. Bodies lied from my feet out to the very distance. There was nowhere I could see where there was not a body in some place. There were piles. Pieces of red flesh hung off lampposts and red lights descended through them. It was an eerie silence that was occasionally broken by a deadly scream and thunderclap. Mankind had met its match, and deep down I knew I was responsible. For in my haste I had killed the very order that had kept them dormant, for an age that even I could have not guessed upon. And now this precious earth had become these creatures' very own feeding ground.